So after the domestic violence charge that occurred in like late February of this year, filming stopped on Mormon Wives season 5. Around that time, the women of Mom Talk, like the cast of that show, met with Disney and Hulu producers to say like, hey, like we feel like we kind of know a little bit more about this. Like maybe they had seen the video, I don't know. Like they clearly had the sense that something was coming. They were uncomfortable filming with Taylor. They were like, this is going to be bad for our show, for our brand, whatever, for our careers. They have a recording of the head of like reality at Disney saying like, I don't want to know about this. Like, don't tell me this. Like, I don't want to know too much. All they really want to do is like not be liable for something like this. And this is exactly what happens when you stick your head in the sand.
Hey, I'm Kate Lindsay, and you're listening to ICYMI, or In Case You Missed It, Slate's podcast about internet culture. And today we are joined by Rebecca Jennings. Welcome back, Rebecca.
Yay, thanks for having me.
Rebecca, you know her. She's a features writer at New York Magazine who recently profiled, quote, the messiest woman on television, which is in reference to Secret Lives of Mormon Wives star Taylor Frankie Paul. It was published just one day after footage of the 2023 domestic violence incident between Paul and her on-again, off-again boyfriend Dakota Mortensen was published by TMZ. That is what this whole episode is going to be about. I want to start by talking about how the public came to know Taylor Frankie Paul and how we then got to the place of her being Bachelorette, because this is not how the Bachelor franchise normally does things. They do not normally pull the sort of Bachelor or Bachelorette from other universes. Like you kind of alluded above, they're either unknowns or they're pulled from like a pre-existing Bachelor cast. So the reason Taylor Frankie Paul ended up there, I mean, there's many you can point to. One is she was first very popular on TikTok. She broke that swinging Mormon mom story. She is sort of referred to as the de facto leader of Mom Talk and of the show. She has significantly more followers than all of the other women. So she has like an allure to her all on her own. But like importantly, both Hulu, which is where Secret Lives of Mormon Wives drops, and ABC, which is where The Bachelor's aired, are owned by Disney. And so this was also a really effective sort of cross-pollination move. And because of her fame in this space, both in this space and online, in that sense, she's a natural choice. But maybe Rebecca, as someone who actually like met and spoke in depth with her, what is it that makes Taylor such a compelling protagonist?
Yeah, I mean, when I talked to the showrunner for The Bachelor, he was talking about how he watched the pilot of The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, and he was like, oh my God, this is the most honest woman I've ever seen on reality TV. And I think that's why she has had so many fans over the years. Like, don't forget, like in 2022, the reason she blew up in the first place was because she went on TikTok Live and was like, yeah, me and my husband are getting divorced was because we were swinging with a bunch of other couples and now we're all getting divorced. And, you know, and like just like letting it fly in a way that you don't often see from, you know, professional influencers or professional reality TV stars in the 2020s when people are much more careful about how they present themselves. But Taylor's not like that. She, you know, even today on Call Her Daddy, Jesse Draper, her co-star, said like Taylor can't lie. Like she doesn't lie. And so, and I, you know, from what I've seen, it seems kind of to be true. It's like when she's mad, and she says what she feels in the moment. And I think that's very compelling on reality TV. And like you said, it's synergy. It's like Disney clearly is trying to beef up their reality TV programming on The Secret Lives. They've had multiple cast members go to Vanderpump Villa, which is also another Hulu reality show. They have them go on Dancing with the Stars, which is ABC, and now The Bachelorette. And so, you know, you can see the kind of the gears moving in that way. But I think with Taylor Frankie Paul, you know, this is a franchise that has had very low ratings, declining ratings over the past few years. And you know, who better to drive ratings than someone who just kind of like burst onto reality TV. And in a year and a half, they've had 4 seasons of the show that's now like more popular than the Kardashians. Like they are such stars. And she really is the anchor to all of that. And so I think they kind of went the nuclear option with casting because despite, you know, everything that was already out there, which includes basically everything that was in that video that we all saw, they chose her. And I pressed the showrunner. I was like, well, she's really controversial, like, you know, XYZ. And he was sort of just like, like, that's like that she's so genuine. That's what's relatable. And, like those kind of things that people in the business say.
I know I always find an excuse to bring a conversation back to Love Island, but it does remind me a little bit of a criticism that Love Island gets in recent years, which is that this is more so the UK, that the people who are on it are too aware that they're on the show. And so things aren't getting as messy as people want. And so it makes sense that someone like Taylor, who, will either like go on TikTok and be like, everyone here's swinging, or she gets on Instagram and it's like, no one liked my CMA's post. And then that becomes a whole plot point for the show. Like, the women clearly do, even though I actually find so many other of the storylines more compelling, Taylor is so clearly like the center of the show, and whatever she does, Mom Talk follows. So that brings us to this year. The future of this Bachelorette season was actually uncertain before this video was released. I'm sure you were abreast of this because of this profile, because in February, like you mentioned, the Draper City Police opened an investigation of new domestic assault allegations. They were made by both Taylor Frankie Paul and Dakota Mortensen. And so when this happened, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives was put on pause. So that's the first news that broke. The filming was paused because of this incident. And I think a lot of people were like, okay, what's the Bachelorette going to do? Like, that is supposed to be airing soon. And so, I mean, in many ways, it was both so surprising that it was pulled, but also a little bit not at all. But you say in your profile that your conversation with, or one of your conversations, the second conversation, took place with Taylor Frankie Paul just days before this new investigation was opened. At that time, maybe in Taylor's words, or what you of what she shared with you, what was the state of their relationship?
Yeah. So I'd asked her, that's the question she gets all the time. She's like, how are you and Dakota? Because that's been sort of the long running theme of the show. And I was like, well, did you save a rose for him? Like he asks you to do on the show before she goes to film The Bachelorette. And she's like unequivocally like, no, like I only am resentful towards him. We are not in a good place. That like we are stuck to each other for the rest of our lives, but we are still figuring out how to even be like cordial and be co-parents. And so from what I've read and what I know, there was no point where they got back together or anything. This was not like a lover's quarrel. This was more of like a co-parenting, really toxic, like whatever dynamic they have. That was what happened.
So then on March 19th, the 2023 video drops on TMZ. We don't know how TMZ got it. There's been a lot of speculation about that. But all we know is that it gets published. And like you said, this incident was not a secret. I knew of it. Anyone who was interested in this knew of it. But watching the video, I'll say for myself, I had to stop halfway through.
Yeah.
We're not going to play it on the episode in case anyone's worried. Like it is quite upsetting. What was your reaction to it?
Oh yeah, I mean it's horrific, and I think like you can read. I mean, this is the same thing with anything. You can read as much as you want about something that happened, but seeing it is completely different. And I think that like the narrative on the show is that she paid her penance, she did her time in probation, and that she was very sorry. She's called it like the worst night of her life. She hasn't had a drink since then. But I think seeing it just completely opens up everything all over again. Like no one except the two of them were there, and seeing it, in person is a completely like it's hard to look at someone the same way when you've seen them in that state. And so I think ultimately, I mean, hours later, the ABC canceled The Bachelorette. And so I think like that is all there is to say about that. Like,
right. Yeah. For those who haven't seen it or don't want to actually watch it, the video basically details, like you said, a lot of what is in this initial report, which is, Taylor Frankie Paul is hitting Dakota. And then towards the end, she starts throwing these metal bar stools. And while she's doing that, you hear her child, one of her children, start to react. And the child starts screaming. This is where I had to tap out. But I think hearing what the scene was actually like and the fact, like really seeing what it was that child was in the middle of, I think, made it hit home. And so, yes, ABC announced swiftly after they're pulling the season. And like we said, for some people, this was a shocking move and it is a huge move. But once Secret Lives of Mormon Wives was paused, like for context, like they included this whole situation in the first season. It was literally the cliffhanger of the pilot. And so pausing for this, I don't know, you start to get the sense of like, okay, something's really
Right.
happening.
Right.
But so yeah, Bachelorette season is pulled. It already was filmed, so it's technically already all there. You witnessed some of it.
And
You got
I saw the premiere episode, which maybe no one will ever see.
Oh
Mhm.
my God. Okay, I have so many questions for you then. So you got to be on set, you got to see the premiere episode. Maybe let's start with what are some of the things that you witnessed on set? And did you get any clues either from that or from seeing the premiere as to what this season kind of would have been like? Is there like a narrative they were setting up or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see it in all the advertisements even for this that were, like, around I see them around New York all the time. It's like, I don't fit the mold. Like, they're really leaning into the fact that, like, this she was a very bold choice for them. And you see that on you see that in the premiere too. I mean, when I was on set, it was basically like being on the set of a TV show, like any like it's just like a lot really kind of awkward and long shooting breaks and just like things are just like they had like all these I was at Chippendales and all these guys had and they're really hot guys, I will say in person. I'm like, I could not believe like everyone was so tall and like gorgeous. So that's also kind of a bummer that those poor wannabe
Yeah.
influencers are not getting their shine their time to shine.
No.
But in the premiere episode, I saw a rough cut of it like a month before it was supposed to air, and I mean, you definitely get the sense that they were going to talk about this stuff. Like there's a extended trailer at the end of it. Often, like when you see the premiere of a season of a show, it'll do like the big trailer for the what's coming in the rest of the season, and I've never seen any of that footage anywhere else. It's like they're like she and one of the men are having a talk about this night. And it's really tearful and looks really dramatic. There's also been reports, I didn't see the footage of this, but that she like walked off of one date where that subject came up. I mean, clearly it was like conversations about it were happening on the set of The Bachelorette. And like even the first night, you know, because she's not drinking right now. Like all the other men are drinking, and she's just like, I'm just having apple juice. Like, mom,
Oh, I was gonna
apple
say,
juice.
did they
Yeah.
get like swig, the dirty soda for her?
I think there was supposed to be, or I know there was going to be an episode with a soda brand that I will not name. I think
Wow.
you
Oh my
might know which
God.
one.
Gosh, like all this is like that's the juicy stuff. I'm like,
I
really, we're
know.
gonna do soda things? All right.
Yeah.
But so okay, it's interesting that they don't shy away from it because there's a point of this that I want to linger on a bit, which is that this footage in terms of what it shows isn't new information. This has been something that the TV audience has known about since we met her. Like we said, it's sort of the cliffhanger of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, the pilot episode. And everything that we see in the video is pretty much already documented in a publicly available police report. I will talk about the network's role in this later. But I think a question I have, and this is something that was actually brought up by an ICYMI follower on Instagram who DM'd us. So like this, thank you for this thoughtful question about like, why was this incident something as viewers that we were really easily able to overlook for 4 seasons until now? Like just in your sort of experience.
I mean, I think the fact that, you know, it did show up on the end of the pilot episode of Mormon Wives. You see Taylor Frankie Paul being put in handcuffs, drunk, like being later charged with domestic violence. But I think when you see a relationship as volatile as her and Dakota's, and you start to wonder, like, well, what actually like there's like no one saw what happened. I think it's one of those things that happen in intimate relationships where it's like it's very hard to like no one knows what happens in normal relationships
Right.
either besides the people that are in them. And I think that she and Dakota were probably given a lot of grace, maybe some of it, you know, earned, some of it maybe not earned, because it's impossible to know. Like, and I think that a lot of people had empathy for her or sympathy for her because maybe they'd been in situations like that themselves. And, one like drunken outburst obviously does not define a person's life. But I also think that like many people, I'm sure, were thinking like, well, what did Dakota do to
Yeah.
get her to that point? And whether that's fair or not, I can't say. But like, there's definitely a lot of discussion whether him allegedly maybe releasing these videos to TMZ was also an act of, you know, spite to try to ruin her career. She has also accused him of being abusive as well, and so I think for for a lot of viewers, that's more complicated than just because someone was involved in an incident of DV, you know, does not necessarily make them like persona non grata on their televisions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like you said, this video is actually part of like a much larger story. And so I will go through that. And I agree as well that there was perhaps like a rose-colored glasses kind of feels like the wrong word to use, but I think, you see the cliffhanger, you see her getting arrested, and you could go technically and go look at the police report, but I think a combination of like not really wanting to look further, probably a little bit of bias because this is a dynamic that we don't see as often in terms of, abuse against men by women. I think made it easier for me to be like, well, I think like what I literally had in my head until this moment was like, I think it was just like a loud argument and someone else called, and it's fine. But I also think another reason why I was like, I don't think this could have been as huge as it ended up being is because Hulu moved forward. They continued to keep her as the star. And so I think all those data points made me be like, well, surely they wouldn't move forward with someone who did what we then saw in that video. And so I think it was a lot of just like ignorance is bliss a little bit. And also like you mentioned, the showrunner saying Taylor is so honest. And it became her owning that and moving on from that became a really big part of her story. And then her character is kind of a mess who makes mistakes. And we also see her in the show in the context of a lot of other stressful factors. Like we have a clip because her family.
Yeah.
This is a clip of Taylor and her family where Taylor is really trying to move on from Dakota. And you can see that one of the barriers to that is her own parents.
I'm trashed him. You come over the next night, me, and then you go and you hang out with another girl, and then he comes the next night and me again.
Okay.
I wasn't lying to you about someone else.
Here's the thing. I'm going to be blunt, freaking honest.
Shit.
He just told me that you guys had seen each other 3 times.
I don't know Taylor.
Before all this. And then you're sitting there telling me that he came over and had sex with you? What does that say about you? I'm not pointing fingers. You guys.
That's what I'm saying. I was trash.
I remember I watched that in real time when that season came out, and truly, like, fuck that. Like,
no, I know. It's like disgusting.
Yeah. And
it's
so
her father. Like, it's her stepfather, but it's like that's the father she was raised with. Like,
yeah. And so
horrible.
I think that makes me immediately also be protective of this person.
I know.
I'm like, okay, well, that's an insane thing to say to your, like, essentially your daughter. Like, I mean, and so we were privy to the fact that this was a very complicated situation. And I think when it comes to both the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives and I imagine the Bachelorette, they did know all of this. And that is why they wanted to make her the star of the show, both of the Bachelorette and continue with Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, because Taylor and Dakota's super volatile relationship was good for ratings. And it was so much of Taylor's story on both the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, and it was carried with her onto the Bachelorette. Taylor, Frankie Paul, does have 2 children with her ex-husband, but she and Dakota also share a child. And so they are bound together by co-parenting. Now, as people who are on the show, they're essentially also bound together by being colleagues. And we know that often storylines are manipulated or encouraged. And so I don't think it is crazy to say that some of their interactions are due to the show, wanting to put them on screen. I mean, as we heard a little bit in that clip, he sleeps with people in her circle. So we always, even when he's like doing things without her, he stays close. None of her friends like him. Like, notably, they all hate him. And we know who some of these friends are married to and what they put up with. But like, they hate this man. And they also talk about his propensity to sort of sabotage these important moments for Taylor, like sleeping with her basically the day before she goes to be the Bachelorette. And I will also note that, as these allegations are coming out, Mortensen recently filed a 3rd allegation of domestic violence. This was for an incident in 2024. And so I'm just pointing out that to acknowledge that, like, at least 2023 onward, like, this has been an ongoing toxic relationship. And so I think this is why, like you kind of mentioned earlier, the video comes out and I don't think people's takeaway is as black and white as you would maybe think if you saw that in a vacuum, because we have had access all these seasons to see how complicated this situation and toxic this relationship is. You know, you also mentioned like Taylor Frankie Paul has alleged mutual abuse. Like even in what we see in the pilot, she says that like he pushed her first. She mentions like an altercation in the garage. We don't see what happened with Dakota before he hit record.
Yeah.
And that is something a lot of people are pointing to when they are speaking in defense of Taylor. Sort of this might be something that's called like reactive abuse, which is like it might have been instigated. It might have. But at the same time, because we don't see what happened before Dakota hit record, we can't confidently say that either. And so it is really hard to talk about this because, you know, I don't want to go in on like a smear campaign against one woman. But I also want to be realistic about what we saw, which is this was horrifying. It happened in front of children. But like me saying it shouldn't happen and that this was a bad thing is not me being like, and justice for Dakota. I think this is about the kid. That a kid was involved in this, what I heard from the kid, that is like disqualifying. That she should not be Bachelorette for that.
Yeah. It was pretty horrific. And like I remember, you know, I had obviously read the reports of like the police report and there was like she was accused of child abuse like in that original police report, and she pled guilty to the domestic violence charge in exchange for like getting all the other charges dropped. But like that was, and police obviously have this video. The women of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives had seen that video, I think more recently. But this people were aware that this video existed, and the fact that, you know, producers didn't do any more digging into that is, I think, a failure.
I agree, because that is, I think, where I land is like, we are not going to know the truth of this situation in terms of like the full scope, and it's kind of fruitless to be navigating like it's something between that's like they should, you know, navigate privately. But I want to focus on like the companies and the production that knew about this, because I think this is why, in my opinion, Taylor Frankie Paul never should have been made Bachelorette in the first place. I mean, so when we talk about possible producer manipulation, like we don't know exactly what happens behind the scenes on Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, but I want to hear from you, from what you've learned. But I will also read a quote from writer Kat Tenbarge, who comes on the show quite frequently. She wrote on Spitfire News about this, and I just want to read this quote. "The reality TV industry isn't casting people in abusive relationships by accident. Exploiting abuse on screen is a pillar of this genre, typically through a misogynistic lens that endangers women and children most of all. There is an incentive to keep abusive dynamics in place, extending the lifespan of volatile relationships and the overexposure of people going through mental health crises and issues like substance abuse. The way these shows and their audiences tend to talk about women at their lowest points is malicious and misogynistic, turning them into malign characters and then acting shocked when the spectacle they created has violent real-life consequences." And this is more broadly, this isn't specifically about Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, but I'm curious for your take on like the producer's role in this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one, you know, really important example of that was reported like this week, I think, by NBC News, which was that like, so after the domestic violence charge that occurred in like late February of this year, filming stopped on The Bachelor or on Mormon Wives season 5. And then around that time, the women of Mom Talk, like the cast of that show, met with Disney and Hulu producers to say like, hey, like we feel like we kind of know a little bit more about this. Like maybe they had seen the video. I don't know. Like they clearly had the sense that something was coming. They were uncomfortable filming with Taylor. They were like, this is going to be bad for our show, for our brand, for our careers. And you have, I mean, like they have a recording of the head of like reality at Disney saying like, I don't want to know about this. Like, don't tell me this. Like, I don't want to know too much. And I think that really just like, I mean, it's like all they really want to do is like not be liable for something like this. And this is exactly what happens when you stick your head in the sand. It's like they want to say like, we had no idea, but it's like everyone knows. This was in the pilot of the show that she's famous for. Like this is not new information. It's just new framing of it and new sort of evidence about it. And I completely agree with Kat's take about how exploitative it can be. Because yeah, it's like I think there's also like back to Love Island. Actually, it's like there's the same
Oh,
conversation.
I'd love to go back there.
It's a much better place right now. Huda, who there was also reports of her being involved in an altercation recently with a partner, and how like reality TV tends to cast women that are like maybe in unstable places and like use them for drama and stuff. And I think it's interesting how both reality TV has evolved and how audiences have evolved with things like that. I think audiences are much less likely now to sign off on very visible instances of domestic violence, alcoholism, even like really toxic relationships. Like you see it even in relationship dynamics that play out on reality TV that aren't necessarily abusive. Like even on Summer House, Kyle and Amanda, like you just see their sort of like bitterness fester. And I think, and they recently announced that they are divorcing, but even before that, people were like, I don't want to see this anymore. This is too dark. And I think there's such a question right now about what is too dark and for reality TV and what is fun and messy. And I think ABC, Hulu, Disney have really missed the mark on this one. Like, and I just think it's something that producers, I hope, learn from.
Yeah, no, I'm really stuck on the quote you mentioned of like, I don't want to know this, because it affirms the sort of the perspective or the what I take away from how this went down was it seems very much like and I'm curious what your thoughts are, but like the only reason now that this season was canceled is because this video came out and it makes them look bad to move on. They cannot get away with this sort of glossing over anymore. I heard the cat.
Sorry.
I love it. And what I am comfortable saying is unfair to Taylor Frankie Paul is that all of these, ABC, Hulu wanted to work with her because she is this volatile.
Yes.
And she's this honest or whatever. This was all these things that we now see are, abuse, were working in their favor in terms of having like a exciting protagonist. And that was knowledge they had throughout filming The Bachelorette, all the way leading up to releasing it. And to now drop her and throw her under the bus as if like this is news to you, I find so shitty.
Yeah.
Because it's just very transparent, in my opinion, why this decision was made when it was made. Which is more so now it makes them look bad, but they didn't really seem to care before when it made their protagonist look bad. But I'm curious about why you think now is the time.
I mean, yeah, I'm assuming this also had to do with like brand safety, advertisers.
Right, Cinnabon pulled out.
Yes, Cinnabon like now no longer works with Taylor Frankie Paul. I'm sure that's one of many. But yeah, and ABC, which is owned by Disney, which is like the kind of like mecca of brand safety, like cannot be associated with someone who's who has a video like this. But again, this stuff was already out there. Like this is just like willful ignorance on the part, like sort of like it's proven to be willful ignorance. So from that conversation where it's like producers just like actually do not want to know because they don't want to be liable for that. And so now they can blame this on, well, like we didn't know that the video was going to get out. Like they could have dug a little bit about that. Like they absolutely could have.
Yeah. And what's kind of annoying, although it hasn't ever gone down quite like this, but like this kind of thing is not necessarily unprecedented in Bachelor Nation. Like for a show that is so like obsessed with like brand friendliness and like it's very, for those who haven't seen it necessarily, it is like such an American show. Like it's very much like very Midwest like vibes. Don't ask me to explain what I mean by that.
I get it.
Yeah. Like, and so, but that's not to say there were no, there weren't things happening that they then had to like account for. I mean, a lot of people are saying about this Taylor Frankie Paul thing is, imagine if the roles were reversed, ABC would have never let this happen. But like, we don't have to imagine because a former Bachelor was accused of, stalking and harassment. Granted, this was after the season aired. This is Colton Underwood who we're talking about. But he went on to be on The Traitors and like have a different reality show. Like he had no consequences. And I mean, back in 2017 when I was covering entertainment, I remember writing about the Bachelor in Paradise incident. I don't know if you were following or a fan during this, where there was filming between two really drunk contestants on Bachelor in Paradise, where they were in a hot tub or a pool, and they had sex, but they were like overly intoxicated, and so like the lines of consent were very blurred. They halted filming for that, correctly so, because I think one and then ultimately two producers filed complaints. But once filming resumed, it was all about, there was so much slut shaming within the show, and then even in the reunion, so much covering their ass of like making everyone say like, no, it was fine, and it's like, again, like brand seems to come first.
Yeah, of
and
course. Yeah.
this just feels like part of that pattern. But I'm wondering, just as we sort of end this conversation, especially because you've spoken to Taylor, then this comes out, like, where do you land on, like, there's a lot in question right now, like not only if the Bachelorette as a entity is going to continue, but also Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Where do you land on Taylor and her future in this?
Yeah, I mean, from what she's told me, she basically said she was the closest to quitting she had ever been because she was just so overwhelmed with it all. And so what I hope for her is that she gets time away from the cameras and from this constant filming. I think what Secret Lives does differently than other reality shows is that it films multiple times a year. So they're essentially always in either a cycle of filming or doing publicity for the season that recently just came out. And so there is really zero breaks. On something like Housewives, you film for, I think, about like 3 months, then 9 months go by, then you're doing a little publicity, and then you start filming again. They don't get those like 9 months of a break, like ever. And so I think, and for all this to happen so fast, I think was just really, really hard on her and probably all of them. And yeah, that's really all I want is for her to sort of like heal in peace and learn how to sort of be a normal like human again, and try to figure out a way that they can co-parent in a way that's just like not completely destructive.
Yeah, I think that's where I land too, and that's also why I like say like ABC should never have cast her, not because like Taylor Frankie Paul doesn't deserve to find love, but because there is clearly a lot of healing that needs to be done, which like we have beaten over and over again, they were aware of, and all this has done is forced that to happen out in the open, or force the consequences of that to happen out in the open, which is harmful for everyone involved, including the kids. Whereas, had this not, this was always going to play out. But now Taylor is doing it with paparazzi, and that helps no one.
I know. It's just like, it's so dark for me to watch. And I as much as I'm horrified by what I've seen, I also just like really hope for the best for everyone involved, including the children.